The transformation of a sentence is all about changing its form without altering its meaning. Very important. So let's look at how we can do this next. So what you have to do is remember that a phrase can be expanded into a clause. For example, a phrase like a throne of gold may be written as a throne which is made of gold. So in effect, the same meaning, but you have changed a phrase into a clause. And of course, you can do a vice versa with it, a clause into a phrase. Thus, the form of a sentence can be changed without changing its meaning. Simple enough? Now, this transformation or change can be done using several methods. Change from active to passive voice and vice versa is one of them. Important. Please remember the terms active and passive may be applied to both the verb and the sentence. And we go on to the next slide. Let's have a look at these sentences. Part A. The boy kicked the football. As I said, the verb and the sentence are both in the active form. Here, the subject, the boy, is the doer of the action. He is active. He is actively kicking the football. We can therefore say the sentence is in the active voice. Let's move on to sentence B. Here what we read is the same sentence, the same meaning, but we've trotted over the object to the subject's position. So now the football has become the subject of the sentence. Does that mean that the football will kick the boy? Not at all, I'm afraid. And thankfully so, unless it's some kind of a horror story. So, the football was kicked by the boy. Passive sentence. The subject, the football, is now the receiver of the action. It is acted on or upon by the boy. We can therefore say the sentence is in the passive voice. Passive, waiting, receiving. And we move on to the next slide. So when is the passive voice used? There are three places that you have to remember when the passive voice is used that we can look at. For example, part A, when we do not want to identify the doer of the action. For example, the watch has been stolen. Why would you not want to identify the doer of the action? Imagine a situation where you are inside a room where there are a lot of people and you know many or most of them, some perhaps even friends. Now you have a strong suspicion about the person who has taken the watch. But you do not want to identify the person because you do not want to cause an embarrassment. So when you don't want to embarrass somebody, you don't want to identify the doer of the action, you can simply say the watch has been stolen in the passive voice and not name who has stolen it. Part B. When we do not know the identity, we don't know the identity of the doer of the action. For example, breakfast has been served. You're in a hotel and somebody has rung from the reception to tell you, sir or ma'am, breakfast has been served in the dining room. You don't know who has gone and put the food there, but you do know it has been served. Passive voice, and we do not know the identity of the doer of the action. Part C, when we want to give importance to the recipient of the action. Remember, recipient in the subject's position in the passive voice. Here we have the speaker was cheered by his classmates. So his classmates are performing the action of cheering, applauding the speaker. And we are making the speaker feel good about the way he's spoken. We're making him feel nice by applauding. We are giving importance to the recipient of the action. Next. Passive forms, importantly, very important, are made up of various forms of the verb be with a past participle. Very easy actually, and I've broken up the sentences to make it clear to you. So look at the top where you have the word be written over the verbs, and then you have the words past participle written, and you have the past participles spelt out for you below. And on the right, just for your convenience and to let you know that you are right, thinking along the correct lines, I have also identified the tenses for you in red. Look at the first sentence. English is spoken all over the world. So the all over the world is at the side. English in the subject's position is a form of the verb be and past participle spoken in the past participles position after the verb all over the world. Similarly, with the vegetables have been bought, and if you go on to the fifth sentence, the gates are going to be. So to be is a form of be, and locked, past participle at night. Let us go on to the next slide. Look at the red blurb at the top. If we want to mention the person or thing doing the action, we use the preposition by. So, she was trained by whom? By a talented teacher. Or, the painting was bought by whom again or what? By the museum. So, the by can be a person or even a thing, all right, doing the action. Let's look at what happens when we use the verb get with the past participle. We can use the verb get with the past participle to form the passive. So we would say, be careful with that mirror, it might get broken. Or, he got caught when he tried to escape. Both are in the passive form. Next, what we look at is the very important rule to remember that transitive verbs have two objects often. So how do you deal with a sentence in which the transitive verb has two objects? When a transitive verb has two objects in the active voice, either the direct or the indirect object may become the subject in the passive voice. For example, I lent my friend a pen, obviously in the active voice. Now, you have the direct object pen, and you also have the indirect object my friend. So who do you put into the subject's position when changing into the passive? Children, you can do both. You can put either the direct or the indirect object into the subject's position. Easy? So when you think next of asking your teacher, ma'am, is this correct? and you're worried whether you've put the right object in the subject's position for the passive voice, you are correct. Both are correct. So, a pen was lent to my friend by me, direct object in the subject's position, or my friend was lent a pen by me, the indirect object in the subject's position. Tick mark for both. Both correct. Well done. And we move on to the next part. Interrogative sentences. Have you ever been to a court and watched the lawyer there asking the witnesses a lot of questions? All right? So that is called an interrogation. Now, in ordinary everyday life too, we ask questions often, and these are called interrogative sentences. Interrogative question sentence. All right? So, for example, has she taken a decision? She is the subject. Has she taken a decision? So this is in the active voice. How do you change it to passive? It's simple. Retain the question word at the beginning, has. Bring the decision forward to has a decision. And then you have your verb form be, as in been, your participle taken, and the word by that we just spoke about to show who has done the action, and she simply becomes her. Important. Don't forget the question mark. If you forget the question mark and you put a full stop there, you've changed an interrogative into a statement. It's incorrect grammar anyway. Has a decision been taken by her? Imagine us saying that. It would be, has a decision been taken by her? It's a question. Remember the question mark. Let's look at the next kind of sentence, which is an imperative sentence. Imperative sentence, if you remember the way I say it today, is like a command, like a direction given to somebody, an order, or perhaps even a request. But imperative, when the sentence in the active voice is an imperative sentence, let be or should be may be used in the passive form. So, part A, shut the door, active voice. You will write it as let the door be shut, or the door should be shut. Both correct and both in the passive voice. Another example is let him complete this task, active. So simply let remains let here in the passive voice. Let this task be completed by him. So all the other rules that we've done so far falling into place as well. The next slide that we need to look at, and it's coming up very soon. So we're dealing with active and passive voice. We're going to look at the next slide now, where we're going to deal with more parts of active and passive sentences. All right? So the next slide just coming up, and meanwhile, remember, imperative sentences to do with commands. All right? So imperative sentence, giving an order or a command. We did interrogative just before this, where we asked question sentences, and we're going to let this task be completed by him, and we have moved on to the next slide, which talks about the absent doer. When the doer of the action, can we just come back to the earlier slide, please? I'll just bring you back to the earlier slide. When the doer of the action is not mentioned in the passive voice, it must be supplied in the active voice. So, part A, the windows have been cleaned. Passive voice. Wouldn't it be just lovely if we could just sit back and imagine perhaps a fairy flying in and cleaning the window for you? automatically. In today's world, it could be a robot doing the action, but then someone has to clean the windows, right? So what we're looking at is naming, bringing in a subject into the subject's position in the active voice. So when the subject is not named in the passive, someone has cleaned the windows, right? And in part B, he was forced to leave. Now suppose he was forced to leave is a standalone sentence like you would see in a test paper. If it's given within a paragraph, perhaps you would be told, why was he forced to leave? Who forced him to leave? Was it his boss? Did the teacher ask him to leave the room for some reason? I hope not. But if it is a standalone sentence and you're given, he was forced to leave, then you would put in something like what I have given you here. Circumstances forced him to leave. Circumstances, all right? That's a good word to remember. So you can actually note down someone and circumstances. These are two words you can use when the subject has not been named in the passive voice and you are changing from passive to active. We go on to the next slide. And here we come to the infamous exception to the rule. Infamous exception. The word famous everyone knows. Infamous? Well, that person whom we are wary of. That person who's a little different. Now let's look at your classroom, right? If you look around you, everyone's wearing the same uniform and you are following the rules of the school and the class. But isn't each one of you unique? Don't all of you do things a little differently from each other at times? So, even with grammar children, it is so important to remember that we too do things differently in grammar sometimes. All right? So, it is important that we remember that not all sentences or verbs can be converted into the passive form. Unless the verb is transitive. Transitive is easy to remember. Think of transfer. Unless the verb is transitive, we cannot change the voice to the passive. And even then, sentences which appear grammatically correct may not be sentences which allow change or transformation to the passive from active. All right? Important to remember, you cannot always change active to passive. Let us look at an example in the next slide. So we remember that a transitive verb has two voices, the active voice and the passive voice. But there are exceptions to the rule, as I just said, and you cannot always change active to passive. So we look at the little picture on the right, if we can call it a picture, that lovely red square with that beautiful big M and the words, I'm loving it. Remind you of something? That big, luscious looking burger and those beautiful French fries or finger chips at the side. Wouldn't you rather be there just biting into that scrunchy lettuce, that beautiful plump burger right now, rather than listening to a lesson in grammar? Well, yes, I'm loving it too, loving the thought. But imagine if we were to say, it is being loved by me. Oh dear me, no. Please do not. That's a wrong. It is incorrect. So this is one sentence which you cannot change from active to passive. How do you know where Not to change? Read, children, read, and it will all become crystal clear to you, like water flowing off a duck's back. You'll know what sounds incorrect, even if you're not sure today. You will by the end of a few days of reading and hopefully today's lesson. Next, please. Transformation of sentences using the adverb to. So we have actually come into the second rule that we are going to work with today. We have walked through active and passive and the changes. Now we are going to look at change in sentences, keeping the meaning intact using the adverb to. So a simple sentence containing the adverb to can be transformed into a complex sentence containing the words so and that with no difference in meaning. Let us study the following sentences. A. The news is too good to be true. Now look at the bold. The bold is given to the word to, T-O-O. The moment you see that word in your sentence in your question 5 part D of the paper, you know automatically that you have to change it into a so that sentence. All right? Almost automatically. So let's look at the second sentence. The news is so good that it cannot be true. Have we changed the meaning by making it negative? No, we have not. It is the same meaning. The news is too good to be true implies that the news is not true. It's so good that it cannot be true. All right? Similarly with the thief ran too fast for the police to catch him. The thief ran so fast that the police could not catch him. Or he is too proud to beg. He is so proud that he will not beg. Clear? Easy enough. And you just remember, if you get so and that, you change it back to the to form. And we move on to the next. The next slide, we will also deal with the adverb to. Do remember, if the adverb to is followed by an adjective, for example, fast, right? The thief was too fast. Plus the to infinitive, too fast to catch. We expand the sentence into two clauses. The first containing so and the second containing that. The thief is so fast, first clause, right? And the second with the that the police could not catch him. So if the sentence containing to and to is in the affirmative, the sentence containing so and that will be in the negative. For example, again, the coffee was too hot to drink, or changing it around, the coffee was so hot that I could not drink it, or again, the coffee was so hot that it could not be drunk. Same meaning for all three sentences. We go on to the next slide. Now, this is funny because one would think using the word to with good, for example, should mean that it's wonderful. I'm afraid not. You are completely on the wrong track. This is too good means exactly the opposite of very good. All too often, we speak of something as being too good when we mean just the opposite. Too good doesn't mean very good. It probably implies that something is too good to be true. So we can look at something else next, also dealing with the rules of grammar. So we move on to the next slide. We've just spoken about too good, and we're now moving on to question tags. I want to remind you of something here, children, which is that very, very important. We must remember that language came before the grammar, right? Language came before grammar evolved. Language grew and then the structure came in. But isn't it important that we remember that structure so that all our words are not put together in a higgledy-piggledy fashion and no one knows what the other is saying because we don't know which word is supposed to follow what and what the ultimate end sentence is supposed to mean, right? So structure of grammar is very important. It's like a strong tree with roots. The roots is the structure, right? Or let's say a building, a strong, tall, lovely building going up. If the foundation isn't strong, what will happen to the building? It'll look beautiful for a day or two, but soon enough, it'll crumble. So it's so important that you learn the rules of grammar. When in doubt, ask your teacher. So we are moving on to the third part today, which is question tags. What are question tags? Question tags are different from interrogative sentences. Interrogative, the sentence itself is a question sentence. With a question tag, which is a tail question, you have to think of the word question. Yes, there is a question at the end, a question mark, and we also have to think of the word tag. Imagine you packing a suitcase, right? And you have the tag hanging from it. The tag is at the end, you put it in with your name and your address perhaps. The question tag is also like the tail of a puppy, a dog, or a cat. So the tail question comes right at the end. And what it does is it transforms a regular declarative clause into a question sentence. All right? What's a declarative clause? You simply declare something. You say something that is true or right? And then we change it by adding a question tag. How do we change it? Why do we add the question tag? All right, so this is what happens. I'm a person and I make a declaration or I say something which is true. Now, I am actually probably in conversation with somebody. So there's somebody sitting in front of me or standing in front of me. And after I have spoken that sentence or that clause, I want the other person to respond, to affirm or confirm that what I'm saying is correct. That is the job of the question tag. By changing my declaration into a question, I'm actually inviting a response from you, from the person sitting in front of me. And I want you to confirm that what I'm saying is correct. So, question tags are formed by adding an auxiliary verb, be, can, shall, might, and repeating the subject of the main clause as a pronoun. All right? So you have in the question tag part an auxiliary verb and the subject repeated as a pronoun. It is important to know which auxiliary verb to use and whether the tag should be positive or negative. Let's look at the next slide. Oh, look at that fellow. Big, ugly, handsome fellow, isn't he? Imagine a scenario where you have walked into your friend's house, perhaps for the first time. And who greets you at the door? Your friend, yes, but also this beautiful young man, all right? This beautiful dog. Imagine the conversation that could happen, but I'm going to look at what? I am saying as I walk in to meet my friend and see the dog. Your dog is rather big. Declarative, isn't he? I'm asking my friend a question. The he is the pronoun that I've added at the end. There is a question mark, and the isn't, of course, is the verb. Don't we have it in the negative? We do, don't we? So your dog is rather big, positive, changed into negative, isn't he? Let's look at the other sentences quickly. His name is Bali, isn't it? It because it's the name. He just wants to play, doesn't he? By now the dog is jumping up at you a little bit. He doesn't bite, does he? There's a slight change here in the sentence. The first part has become negative. What happens to the question tag? It's become positive. That's right. So an easy way to remember it is, not always, but very, very often. Most often, in fact, you will find that if the first part is in the positive, the second part becomes a negative. You have already fed him, haven't you? Meaning he doesn't want to eat me, does he? If you haven't, I should leave now, shouldn't I? All right? So, rather than repeat the main verb, a form of be or other auxiliary verb could be used. Auxiliary verb in the primary or a modal verb that is used together in the tag. So we go on to the next, which is which deals with exceptions, all right, that we've already spoken about. So one exception would be where you have a positive and a positive. Let us have tea, shall we? We don't say, let us have tea, shalln't we? Shall we not? Shouldn't we? Shalln't we is wrong, children. Never write shalln't we. Shall we not? It's pedantic, isn't it? I mean, who speaks like that? Have you ever heard somebody come up to you and say, let us have tea, shall we? Or shall we not? So both need to be positive. The only correct sentence here with the question tag, the conversion is, let us have tea, shall we? Or let us go for a walk, shall we? There will be no negative form used here. And we go on to the next slide. Here we have come to the end of the 3 rules we've done, but not quite. We are now looking at using those rules. So if you have your question paper in front of you, I need you to turn to question 5, part D of your paper, the English language paper 1 language we're dealing with. And we look at the question which is given in the blue blurb at the top. What is very important, children, always is read the question carefully. All right? Read the question carefully. And then in transformation, equally or even more important perhaps is when you read the sentence given to you, read also the direction given to you after it, the instruction. All right? So we rewrite the following sentences according to the instructions given after each. We make other changes that may be necessary, but we do not change the meaning of each sentence. Let's look at the sentences. All right? Now this I'm going to actually give you as an assignment. So be careful and read carefully. We look at 1 or 2 together today, read through 1 or 2 together today, and the rest you will solve on your own. So number 1, it rained so heavily that they could not go on a picnic. Read that again. It rained so heavily that they could not go on a picnic. You have your hint there, so and that. And it says in the direction, the instruction, rewrite using to and to. Simple enough. It rained too heavily for them to go on the picnic. Easy enough. The rest I am not going to solve. You are going to solve. But this is how you're going to put to use the lessons you've learned today when you work out your answers in grammar. So number 2, his behavior vexes me sometimes, irritates, angers me sometimes. Begin, I am. Number 3, it was so hot that the PT period could not be held. Begin, it was 2. So are you being able to identify 2 was? That's right. So it's your active passive we're working with. 3, again, so and that, so 2 and 2 sentence. The next slide. The school captain was elected by the students of classes 11 and 12. Yes, active passive. Begin, the students. 5, my pocket has been picked. Begin, someone, and so on till the end of the exercise. I hope that by now you are feeling a lot more comfortable with the way grammar has to be tackled. These 3 rules are simple and easy to you. So we move on to the next part, which, children, we are nearing the end of our presentation. So we are moving on to the next part of the presentation, which today is going to be, yes, that's right, the question and answer session. We are moving into the question and answer session. So I am waiting for questions and answers to come up. Oh, there's one here from you already. What could be an easy way to remember how to convert active to passive voice? That's right. We are looking for easy ways to remember, aren't we? First of all, children, always remember, this is functional grammar we are dealing with, applied grammar, right? So when you are actually converting, don't consciously think of structure or formats, all right? But if you do revise before, you'll remember simply that what happens is that the subject in the active voice trots over to the object's position, and when changing to the passive voice, the object trots over similarly to the subject's position. That's your first thing to remember. All right. Then what you also do is you can use a form of the verb be with the past participle. Remember that little table we did? It's all there. It's going to be available on the www.cisc.org's official YouTube site, right? The official council site. So you can just look it up and you will find that table there. You can take a screenshot and practice with it if you like, right? Or just pause the screen. So that would be an easy way to remember how to convert active to passive. Can we have the next question? What do you change who into when you convert active to passive? That's easy again. I think when you read, you'll find that who changes into by who and whom into who. So active passive, it's simply who into by whom into who. Easy? We can go on to the next question. Right. How do you change where do you live into the passive voice? Where is the direct object? Remember what I said about transitive verbs and having a direct object? So the sentence, where do you live, since it lacks a direct object, cannot be changed into the passive voice. Easy? So it lacks a direct object. It would be futile to try to change this sentence into the passive voice. Please remember, not all sentences can be changed into the passive voice. Can we have the next sentence question, please? Right. Is it okay to use passive voice when writing? Generally. Of course it's okay. But being okay is not the same as being great. First of all, remember, passive voice is grammatically correct. All right? It's just a matter of style, how you choose to write, whether you wish to write in the active voice or in the passive voice. Both are perfectly correct. But what I would say is that when you write, write actively and not passively. That I would say to you. But yes, passive voice is correct always. All right? Of course, it's correct. It's a part of your grammar. All right, the next question. Your help came too late to be of any use to me. How can I convert this sentence? All right, so you need to look back at your rules in grammar and remember that the first thing you need to focus on is the word to. That's right. Just look at the word to. That's your hint. So what will you change to into? You'll change to into so and that. Correct? So your help came too late to be of any use to me would become your help came so late that it was of no use to me. All right? To and so and that. That is your rule here. The next one, please. All right, the questions are coming in fast. In which voice are the tenses not changed? All right, so you are going to look at change from active to passive and vice versa, right? So we are not looking at this at all for these rules in grammar. You would be looking at tense change with all sentences in active and passive voice conversion, right? So you do need to remember that structure and format very, very carefully. Can we have the next question, please? How can we make out whether a sentence is in active or passive voice? Right. So this again is simple. It's easy. If the subject is actually doing the action, he is performing the action actively. So we are looking at an active doer. Then the sentence is in the active voice. And if the subject is simply, as I said earlier today, receiving the action passively, then it is in the passive voice. What happens to the doer of the action when active voice changes to passive voice? Right. So what happens is that the doer of the action, as I said, trots over to the position of the object. They interchange their positions basically when active changes to passive. Of course, the doer remains the doer, but he's no longer in the subject's position. He has gone over to the object's position. We can go on to the next question. Are there some sentences in which a transformation is not possible? Absolutely, there are some sentences in which a transformation is not possible. We've spoken about that, and please remember, very, very easy to remember is that red box with the big M. So when in doubt, think, is it a transitive verb? Does it have an object that it can transfer the action to? And if it doesn't, then no passive form would be possible for that active voice sentence. Or in some cases, as I said, with the red and the yellow beautiful picture, I'm loving it, you simply cannot change it to passive voice. The next, please. How can we write, the barber gave me a haircut in the passive voice? All right, I really think that you need to look at your rules for this. I mean, what could be simpler? The barber is in the active voice. He is the active doer of the action. And what is he doing? He's giving me a haircut. The only thing is that there is a me and a haircut. So it is a direct and indirect object both. Right. So you will just look at putting either the haircut or me at the beginning of the sentence and trotting over again the barber to the object's position, and you are done. Right? You're just going to put in the past participle, change the verb around, and you've got your passive voice. The next, please. May I know the appropriate definition of a phrase and a clause? All right. So for this, you just need to consult any grammar book or your teachers, right? Because with a phrase, you would have a simple group of words, and with a clause, you must have a verb in it, right? So clause is a little more difficult. It would have a subject, it would have a verb in it. So it's a lot closer to a complete sentence. All right, so here I would really have to need to get into simple, complex, compound. That I will leave for another class where we can do this in more detail. So we will talk about phrases and clauses in another class, another session, definitely. So may I have the next? Yes. Do we have to change the tenses also when we convert active to passive voice or vice versa? Yes, we would have to change the form of the tense. Well, what I would say is that present remains present and so on, of course. But you would have to change the tense according to see, what happens is that you have a verb, and the auxiliary actually dictates the mood, right? The mood, the tense of the verb. So look at your sentences, put an active, put a passive next to each other, and see what is happening to the tense of the verb, and you'll know how to make the conversion. Can I have the next question, please? Could you please explain what a participle is and how to identify it? All right. So participle, it's a lot like it's an adjective. It takes on the form of an adjective. It's a verb which is used as an adjective, if I may put it very, very simply. So if you have something like a sleeping dog, all right, or the dancing lady. Now the word sleeping or dancing is a verb, but here sleeping is used to describe the noun dog, and dancing is being used to describe the noun lady, right? So the verb is being used as an adjective. There you have a participle, so you can easily identify it by seeing whether it is describing a noun. All right, a verb which is describing a noun. So the function has changed and it's become a participle. The next question, please. What is a transitive verb? All right. I thought we had dealt with this earlier today, but never mind. So transitive, as I said earlier, think of the word transfer. All right. It moves on, doesn't it? How does it move on? It basically, what you have to transfer is you move the action onto something, an object. The object could be a thing or a person, but you have to transfer the action to an object. So that is what we're looking at where transitive verbs are concerned in active and passive voice. So can we move on? All right. So could you please explain once again the usage of get and got in passive voice? What I was talking about here is simply the presence of the word get or got in the passive voice. Get or got, nowadays you will find, because we follow let's say British English, is not very commonly or very often used in all sentences. All right. So you can say, would you please get me a spoon or a glass of water from the next room, please? All right. Or would you please get me a glass of water? So it just shows that you're asking someone to bring you something. It is just another word to be used instead of bring or brought, for that matter. All right, so it is like the word buy, which shows you who's doing the action. Get is just used instead of bring or brought. That is about it in active passive. All right, so what happens if a transitive verb has two objects again? If a transitive verb has two objects, we have dealt with this. You can look back earlier. You have an indirect object and you have a direct object, right? So you can bring either one of the two. You can bring either to the subject's position when you are changing to passive voice. So if the transitive verb in the active voice has two objects, you can bring either of the two objects to the position of the subject in the passive voice. All right? In an interrogative sentence, is the first word of the sentence always retained when changing into passive voice? Not necessarily. But I did say that you can. The how, the when, the what, the why has usually or very, very often you will see that the word is retained. So that would be an easy way really for you to remember and start the sentence. What is the tag question for I am a student or I am clever? Right. Okay. Now imagine making a declaration like I am a student. I am a student is a declaration, yes. Normally it would just stand by itself, or you can actually add a tag question as in I am a student, aren't I? In that case, you're throwing out a challenge perhaps to somebody who's trying to stop you enter the gates of the school. I'm a student here, aren't I? Or if you're a little diffident and you're not so sure and you want confirmation, you could say, I am a student. Am I? Not very commonly used, but you can. The same with the, what was the question? I am clever. Could I just see that question once more, please? If I could just see that sentence that was given that you need changed. What is the tag question for I am a student or I am clever? All right. So I am clever is right. I am clever could also become I am clever, aren't I? So you are actually celebrating the fact that you are clever. You can say I'm clever, aren't I? All right, so positive changing to negative and so on. So I think with this, we have come to the end of today's session with the grammar. Oh, we have one more. Fantastic. What is the easiest way to learn how to use question tags? Again, simple, children. The easiest way to learn how to use question tags is, of course, remember the word question and remember the word tag. You have to have that question mark at the end and you have to think of it as a tag or tail or end part. All right, that's the first thing you need to remember. Then, of course, you need to remember that with a question tag, you actually need to use an auxiliary verb, right? And you have to change the subject into a pronoun and put that at the end before the question mark. So easy to remember is change positive to negative, mostly. Some exceptions change positive to negative or vice versa with question tags. Put in a comma instead of a full stop at the end of the declaration. Change it to a comma. Then put in a verb, a form of the verb required, an auxiliary, primary or modal. Add a pronoun, which is the subject, change it into a pronoun at the end or retained as a pronoun at the end and a question mark. And you've got your question tags, easy to remember.